Is your church keeping children safe? Are your communications safe environment compliant? See if your church passes our 5-point inspection. Hey there, it's Matthew Warner, and this is the Finding Uno Show. Well, welcome to the Finding Uno Show. Who's Uno? Oh, you know Uno. He's that one lost sheep the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after, and we are here to help you find him. My name is Matthew Warner, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matthew Sewell. What's going on today, Matt?
Not a whole lot. Still sweater weather over here, clearly.
Very nice. Looking good.
Done soon. You never know.
Yeah, well, one of these days. All right, so you work with a lot of our dioceses at Flocknote, most of which technically require all 5 of these things. And even if they're not required, though, these are things that every church should really be practicing in order to be what we call safe environment compliant today. We're going to talk about, what does that mean? But why is this important, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously just to make sure that we can keep everything on the up and up. I mean, we all hate seeing those types of stories like, oh, so-and-so is texting a minor and nobody knew about it until they found the text, or a police officer posed as a teenager, like all those things that are, frankly terrible. And I mean, I don't know that, unfortunately, we'll ever be able to completely eradicate that type of thing, but there's a way that, churches and dioceses, for those not Catholic or Episcopal, groups of churches in a geographical area, can basically make sure to give them something to do, to take care of the policies that they're imposing, because the policies are good. It's basically making sure that, if there is like it has to have a one-on-one or back and forth kind of discussion, that it can be seen by other people. But then also that it's something that's still not going to just hamstring their churches with, some bureaucratic solutions like, oh, here's a policy. Well, best of luck. Kind of thing, or where they just say like, good luck, go do your own thing, as opposed to giving them all something that gives kind of, a certain amount of oversight, but this still forwards the mission of the church, right? Yeah. So I think that's the balancing act. That the reality is everybody's going to be communicating in some way, and we can choose to plug our ears to it and say it'll be fine. They'll take care of their policy. We trust them. But it's a whole nother thing entirely to be able to say, yeah, I gave you the policy. Now I'm going to give you something to be able to accomplish that. And then also I'm going to be able to, work with you to make sure that it's all, on the up and up kind of thing. So to kind of make everybody speak a common language, I guess, is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so the purpose of safe environment compliant policies is, number one, primarily to protect young and vulnerable people. So these do the main reason, and again, there's policies you're going to have across the board for this that are not just, we're going to focus mostly on the communications side of it today, because that's what we really help churches do. And that's what Matt's talking about, is how do you still communicate with people and remain compliant and not have policies that, basically make it where you can't talk to each other anymore in the modern day, and still comply with these things. So that's part of the challenge. But the ultimate goal, of course, is to protect young and vulnerable people from unfortunate, disturbed, messed up people in the world that want to harm them. And so that's the primary part. Secondarily, though, and Matt, you mentioned this, is like we want to protect our leaders and keep them from ending up in situations where, that can cause further problems or confusion, and leave them open to even people that are struggling with issues, making claims that can't be backed up, or, putting them in a place that they can't defend, And so if you're following certain policies, then you're able to protect both them and yourself as a leader. So it's good tools. But what we saw happen when all of this, the last couple of decades, the church has done so much, like more than any other institution in the world, to implement policies to protect the young and vulnerable. But what happens sometimes is they're so strict that you can no longer do what you need to do. Or really what I've seen on a practical level is they latch on to particular features of particular tools. So they say, you can't use this feature in Facebook. That's against the policy. But of course, that feature in Facebook changes every few months. It's different. It works differently. Or there's something new that's happening now, and there's a new platform, and there's a new online tool that they're using. And so you couldn't just say, don't use this feature, don't do that. And then you just lock everything down. Don't use anything because we don't know what's safe. And so what we found early on was like, what we needed to come up with were some principles that like, you need to abide by these principles, regardless of which tool you're using to communicate, that will help us, comply with these types of policies. So that's where these evolved from. So we have 5 of them we're going to go over today with you, that we found work really well to just make sure that the way you're communicating and just the way you're training your leaders to communicate will help, number 1, protect vulnerable and young people, and then 2, protect your leaders to keep them from ending up in precarious situations.
Yeah. So I know, Matt, you were going to run through the 5 things real quick to kind of kick us off, right?
Sure. Yeah. So the one is archiving all of your communications. So again, we're talking about digital communications here. So it's not in person is obviously a different policy where you're meeting one-on-one with someone, you're meeting somewhere with a door open or with a window in it, those kind of things. Those are separate from what we're talking about today. But here, archiving all of your communications is the first one. Second is copying parents on anything that's sent to minors. The third is protecting your sender's contact info. So the people sending it, making sure you're protecting their personal contact info. 4 is controlling access to member info. So don't let just anyone have access to other members' contact info. And then 5 is giving multiple admins access to all of this information. So the data, the communications, the archive of all the communications, all of that. So those are the 5 principles, and we can run through each one and kind of break down why they're important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the first one was, remind me again. I'll take the first one.
Archiving everything.
Right.
So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, because right, God forbid that. One, I always like to point out is like, again, your churches are already communicating in a certain way. Because I mean, they could say, oh, we don't need that, or it's like, well, you do, right? Do you want to? But eventually, again, God forbid, do you want to spend tens of thousands of dollars on discovery fees for attorneys to go and like hunt down somebody's personal Gmail address? Again, this goes to the protecting leaders just as much as it is protecting minors. But if you have everything kind of in one central spot, like us at Flocknote, right, for example, is even if somebody, God forbid, deletes it or covers their tracks or something, we keep a record of that so we can always call it back up. And even in the case of somebody not doing that, that the other person you assigned as an admin or your friendly neighborhood Flocknote happiness engineers can go and look up something, a comment and say, okay, no, they actually just said this and it went out at this time and the person's contact info wasn't real and all that sort of thing. Right. So I think that's a really important thing because the data is going to be archived one way or the other. It's just how do you actually, what kind of control do you have over being able to call that back up and being able to actually go look for it if, again, God forbid you need to do that. Right.
Yeah. So if you're using something like Facebook, technically you could get a court order to go in and violate, not violate, but appeal to whatever data records they have and pull up information and look up. So if someone had a one-on-one conversation on Facebook, getting that conversation back, so you could say, no, this is what the person said, this is how I responded. It's very difficult. Same with like if it's on a one-on-one text thread between 2 phones, going to the carriers and finding phone records and doing all that kind of stuff. Very difficult to be able to do. So that's, again, all 5 of these things are things Flocknote helps you do automatically. We built it in to make this really easy to comply with. So in Flocknote, whether you're sending it to lots of people and they're replying back individually, or you're having one-on-one emails or text conversations, everything is archived. So everything's there, it's recorded, you can pull it up anytime. We can help you pull it up if for some reason something got deleted. It's all there for us to be able to pull up as a record. So that's number 1. Number 2 is copying parents. So any note that's going out to a minor, so even if you're sending like a group text out to 30 youth or something, how you need to make sure that the parent gets the same message as the kid. Now there's lots of reasons this is helpful. Just from a ministry standpoint, usually you're talking to the parents a lot anyways, not just the kid. But it's good for the parents to know everything that the kid's been sent. And so making sure, again, you can throw the parents on anything or arrange your groups in Flocknote to where that when you send something out to your youth ministry, it's not just the kids, but also their parents getting the same text message or email, same exact message, and making that really easy and practical. Let's see. So the third one, so 1 is archive everything, 2 is copying parents when you're talking to minors, and 3 is protecting your sender's contact info. So this one's really important because you got If you send out, say, a group message to 40 different kids, say, now the each kid knows your personal phone number, and so now they can go out, even though you didn't intend for it, they text you something sensitive just to you. And it opens it up to where now these private conversations, and from a ministry standpoint, you may feel like you need to respond, you should reply, but you're stuck because it's outside the system in a way that is not as easily trackable, and to protect yourself and them. And so again, in Flocknote, you can have those one-on-one. When they reply back, you can then reply back as well, one-on-one text messages, but it's archived, and it also complies with all these other 5 things where it's going to be, multiple admins can have access to it and all that kind of stuff. So we'll get to that one in a second. But you want to make sure that your personal phone number and email address are not out there as much as possible, because then that opens it up to where people are sending you private messages that make it more difficult. Now, if you're a staff member and you have your email address out there, that's again, if you have a church email address, that's great, because that's on your church email servers in a sense. So you'll be able to pull that up. There'll be access to look at that conversation that's having over your personal professional church email address. And so it doesn't mean you have to do everything. You can't put your church email address out on your work email address, I should say, out on your website, because that will be tracked in its own way as well. But anyway, so that's number 3, protecting.
Well, I was going to say on that too. I mean, more practically, I don't know that people necessarily look all that often at the email address on file. With the texting, it's really handy. I mean, that's one of my favorite features of Flocknote in particular, is that you can still just be texting back and forth, and it just keeps a record, right, like you said. But with emails, I mean, we did the episode on the scam that's going to hit your church last season, where it protects against it just the same as that, when you can say, mail@flocknote.com instead of Betty Sue at holycross.org or whatever. You can say, here's where the emails are going to be coming from, but most often people are going to just look at the from name anyways, based on the relationship that they already have for you. So it's just more practical anyways, but it does, check the safe environment box too.
Cool. Okay, so number 4 is control access to member info. So you don't want to send out like a whole database of, here's all of our members' phone numbers and email addresses for our whole congregation, right? Because then it gives every person in your community, and whoever you're sending that out to, which oftentimes is on the website or somewhere public, now any of them can contact each other and go outside the system in that way. And so you want to make sure that you only have your approved leaders or ministry leaders or volunteers in some cases are the only ones that have access to see who's on different groups, but also what their email address is, what their phone number is, all that kind of stuff. So again, that's built into Flocknote as well. Mm-hmm. So number 1, okay, go ahead, Matt.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, and again, it's similar, just like it hits the practical note at the same time. I mean, I know that if I got I'll get a text from or an email from somebody who's a reader at my church because they need a sub or something, and that's understandable. But if it was just some Joe Schmo fellow parishioner of mine, I would be like, "What? How the heck did you get my information?" So I mean, not only is that just a bad idea generally, I'm not. I know I get the idea behind having a directory, but yeah, at the same time, being able to just control that is super important.
Yeah, I think the days of the old church directory where everyone has everyone else's phone number and email address is just, I think, gone in this because most members want their personal information locked down a little bit more than that. They don't want the church just taking it and sharing it with any old person. And so unfortunately, it causes too much trouble for too many people. And it also says something about your church. When I give my information to the church, I want to know I can trust them with it. And so if I get the sense that they're just taking it and giving it to any old person that wants to use it, now I'm hesitant to give more information to the church. So it is a way that you build trust with your members to say, we're going to control access to your personal information and not just give it to any old people that want to use it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And number 5 is give multiple admins access. So this is key in that you might be the only admin in there that can see what was sent to every person, has a record of everything. So it's important to have another adult, another staff member or volunteer that's has some form of leadership at your church or ministry that also has access to all of these different things. And so again, that's something we build right into Flocknote, where you can give multiple admins access to everything. So that way they can always see, there's always someone else that can potentially see, again, you control who that is, but see what conversation is going on. So it just keeps people in check, to know that, look, what's happening here is not totally out of the someone else's watch. And so it's one of the fundamental practices for safe environment compliance, and kind of rounds out these 5 principles that people need to comply with. So
Yeah, I have a question on that actually though. So
Sure.
is there a shadow side to that? Can you have too many admins and basically kind of recreate the same problem as just having one, do you think?
Oh yeah, sure, of course. And I mean, I think a lot of people at churches know, like, we don't want to give that volunteer access to all of the people's contact info, because they're just going to start sending stuff out to everybody that we don't really want them sending out. So again, that's another reason why, just for a practical purpose as a church, if you have all your ministries using the same tool to send out their main communications, like Flocknote, sending all your emails and texts, you can see how much is everyone communicating, how much are people getting from us, how much is so-and-so, the person that tends to over-communicate, sending out to their people. Do we need to talk to them about maybe not sending quite so often, right? So having all that in one place helps you improve your communication overall, so you can really look at it. So all these things work together. But in terms of safe environment compliance, it's those 5 principles are the main ones we've seen repeatedly across the country in all these different contexts at different dioceses, where if you comply with those principles, and you can apply those to any tool and be compliant, I think. So again, archive everything, all the conversations, not just the ones going to everybody, but the one-on-ones as well. Copy parents on anything you're sending to kids. Protect your sender's contact info, so don't let your personal email address or cell phone number be given to everybody, because that opens up opportunities for them to send you private messages. 4 is control access to member info. So again, protect your members' contact info. Don't just give it to everybody. Make sure it's locked down and you control who has access to it. And 5, give multiple admins, at least more than one, access to all of this different information. So again, all things we've built into Flocknote to make this easy for folks, so you can still communicate, you can still build good, solid personal relationships with people, while still keeping children safe and remaining safe environment compliant.
Yeah, awesome. Great topic. Okay, so before we go, we're going to take a listener question, as we always do. So we're going to head over to our People Got Church Problems segment. Okay, this week's question is from our friend Kathy, and Kathy asks, is it better to vary the times you send text messages, or is it better to keep it consistent, like all messages sent out at 2 p.m.? Or another way to ask is, when is the best time to send text so your peeps actually open and read them?
Good question, Kathy. So the best time to send texts, I think, of course, vary based on use, but what I like to do is put myself in the shoes of the person receiving it. So when would I like to get this thing? So if I'm reminding them about a holy day on Thursday, a text at like 5 or 6 p.m. the night before is great for me, because it's before I've planned what I'm doing the next day. It's while I still have time to remember I got to fit that in my schedule. I'm awake, I'm not probably in the middle of dinner yet, so think about those kinds of things. Now, getting a text if it's a bunch of dads and they're at work, and it's like sending it to them at 10 a.m. when they're probably in the middle of something else, not as good, right? Again, think about maybe in the evening or on the weekend, or a time when they're not already caught up with something else that they have to put their attention towards. So put yourself in the shoes of the person receiving it, and think about that. Texts are so powerful at reminding people, but that's why they're so powerful, is because they're very disruptive. But getting the right reminder at the right time during the busy week is what makes them so powerful. So a lot of times, if it's a reminder like the night before, if you're promoting something or asking for feedback, again, ask what that person's doing right now. If you want someone to reply back to something, then maybe 5:30 is not a great time, because they're probably in the car driving home from work, maybe, right? So that's not a good time where they're going to reply back, because they're driving, hopefully. So think about those things. If you're sending a text and it's 6 in the morning. Is everyone awake yet? Are they going to be annoyed with you if you get one at 12 at night? So that's where you can use that scheduling feature. Just because you're up at midnight working on something doesn't mean you need to send the communication out right then. Schedule it to go out the next day or at the time that it's supposed to go. So those are a few things to think about, but put yourself in the shoes of the other person. There's not, there's in terms of like regular time, like consistency is good if it's if it's needed. If it's a regular event and you got your regular things happening and you have a consistent reminder or something else like that can be helpful. I think consistency is good where it makes sense, but a lot of times it's because it's not consistent, especially with a text, that it actually stands out. It's like, oh, I don't normally get that text from so-and-so. What's that about, right? So you can use both to effect depending on the situation.
Yeah, well, thank you again for that question, Kathy. Hopefully that was a help. Well, that is all the time we have for today, but before we leave, please be sure to stick around as we kick it over to our friend Liz to find out where Uno is today.
Hey everyone, this week Uno was spotted in Toronto at Blessed Sacrament Parish. This photo was sent in by Angie and she is with her husband, Deacon Bill, and they are both Flocknote admins at the parish. So thank you so much, Angie, for sending us this photo. Now, if any of you listening find Uno, snap a photo and send it to us at howdyatfindinguno.com. We would love to see it and potentially feature your photo in a future episode of the Finding Uno show. And if you send us a photo, we will send you a little treat as a thank you. Alrighty, that wraps it up for today. But like always, please leave us a review, subscribe to the Finding Uno show wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, we'll see you again on the Finding Uno show. God bless.